right, well, welcome everybody to our Passive House Massachusetts monthly meeting. We took a break over the summer. I hope you guys took some time off as well. We're very glad to see that our audience has not deserted us and you guys are back too. Before we dive into the meat of tonight's presentation, just a few quick items. I want to remind people that we are tracking attendance. So if you're here in person, make sure to check your name off at the table in the front. And if you're online, I advise you to put your name into your little Zoom window, because this is how we track attendance for your CEUs. And if you want a CEU for this event, you can go to phmass.org/CEU and fill out the form there. With that out of the way, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this event, Mass Save, particularly their Passive House and All Electric Homes Training and Workforce Development Program, which supports our monthly meeting series and supports Passive House construction in Massachusetts. Here we are. As you know, Mass Save is a coalition of the state's utilities working to improve energy efficiency across the state. And they've got incentives for all kinds of passive house construction, starting with single family, starting at $25,000 for a new single family home, and starting at $3,750 for per unit for multifamily buildings. If you want to get started, you can just get in touch with folks at this email here. It's multifhr@icf.com is the multifamily, and single family is resnewconstructionma@icf.com. And if you're building some other kind of building and need help navigating the incentive program, you can email us, contact@phmass.org, and we can help put you in touch with the right folks. But we're always available to help you navigate this process. ICF is as well. They're very helpful. The earlier you get in touch with them, the better. I'd also like to thank all of our PHMass members. And I do it every month. I thank the PHMass members for their help, but this time I want to thank them even more, especially because it's really the PHMass members and all the people who spoke with us that made the research possible that we're presenting today. Without the participation and support of this community, we wouldn't have any of this to say. And Beth is also going to do it, but I'm also want to thank the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center for the generous grant that they gave us that made this report happen. It's really the driving force behind our ambitious new education agenda that Beth is going to talk about. I think many of you will already know our tonight's speaker, Beth Campbell, but for those who don't, Beth is our education program director. She has 20 years of experience in construction with tool bags on. She's been an estimator, a project engineer, a project manager. She is a PHIAS certified builder and a PHI certified passive house tradesperson and a PHIAS instructor and the president of Passive House Rhode Island. And she also finds time somewhere in that to be the Passive House Massachusetts Education Program Director. I don't know how she does it, but she does it. She does it really well. And I'm so excited to have her share the results of our research with you today. Welcome, Beth.
Great. Thank you. Awesome. So let me make sure that I'm all set here. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Good to see you online too. And back to school, how appropriate. Here we are in September already. How did that happen? Okay, for those online, I'm going to try and not wander too far out of this owl. I think if I stand here, you can still see me. So want to make sure that
It'll follow you around.
Yeah, it'll follow me. Great. So welcome. We're really excited to talk about what we've been up to over the last eight months or so. And as Alexander was just mentioning, we have a lot of people to thank. Massachusetts Clean Energy Center has provided really generous grants to Passive House Massachusetts to make this work possible. I completed over 40 interviews with folks, and that's going to be a continuing process. So all the folks that made that happen, and of course, our membership and sponsors making this work possible. So for the next 30-40 minutes or so, we're going to talk about some of the juiciest details that we pulled from these interviews. and also how that is defining our work for the next couple of years. So we're first going to talk about this education needs assessment. That's the fancy word for the set of interviews that we did. And we're going to go through some of the high level themes that came up. So here's the 4 high level themes that a lot of those big takeaways came into: team values, planning, airtightness, and ventilation. Probably no big surprise to those of you working in the field. And then we're gonna briefly touch on our education strategy and talk about next steps. So the report that we've put together based on these interviews is now live on our website. At the end of the presentation, there'll be a QR code. You can download that. We'll also give you the way to find it. And we'll be publicizing that over the next month too. So keep an eye out in general. So in terms of our educational needs assessment, we spoke to a broad range of professionals. I just want to give the lay of the land of what it was that we did, right? So I spoke to over 40 people. I talked to architects, various roles within from GCs. I talked to developers, CPHCs or CPHDs, project verifiers, really a range of people helped us to understand project development and project delivery, kind of, soup to nuts, and their process. Their work is at the heart of this report that we're presenting on tonight. And I need to move something on my screen. There we go. That's not in the way. And those 40 interviews represent over 130 distinct passive house processes in Massachusetts alone. And of those 130, over 20 certified projects. So as you can see, we've got a lot of projects in the pipeline right now, right? Pretty incredible what's happening in the state. So that gives you a sense of how we conducted these interviews. They were primarily about an hour long. We, went through all of this lovely qualitative data, and now we've pulled out the themes and some of those best practices, a lot of those insights, and we're distilling them down here. So, the first of those 4 themes is perhaps the most esoteric, kind of hard. It's the least, concrete set of examples and processes, but really it's around team values. So it was the largest recurring theme, I would say, is not only bringing the right knowledge, but truly the right mindset to this work. So there's no way to guarantee team commitment to Passive House. However, there is what we're recognizing is a profound industry shift toward building in this way and building better. And the way that that's happening is through collaboration, true collaboration. So this idea of buy-in came up again and again from all types of people. And what that means, it means a lot of things when you want to distill it down. And one of the things is thinking beyond your role. So a lot of us are pretty siloed in project delivery. We're thinking about our own, the folks on our own team, whether we're architects or whether we're the GC, making sure that we are aligned. But really what we're finding in Passive House, that it's like a unified organism that is delivering these projects together. So working in concert to deliver these. And it takes a can-do attitude. It takes commitment from the team to really embody the sense of not just teamwork from within your own cohort, but a sense of like, we have to do this together as a project team for the entire project in order to make sense. And what we're finding is that people are teaching others on their team, on other projects, other groups. We see that there's so much sharing of knowledge in this community. It's really darn impressive. I see a lot of heads nodding right now. And it also, I think part of this mindset of buy-in, it helps to understand that that we have impacts, right? Our individual role is going to impact not only the project, but the others that are working on the team, as well as the building inhabitants. So, you know, really understanding how the attitude piece, how the sense of ownership of the project plays in. So, coming together as a team and truly internalizing the shared mission and proactively reaching beyond our disciplines. That's what we see as a pattern showing up again and again. So outside of buy-in, then there's also motivation. These are almost hard to distinguish between these concepts, right? These values that we see showing up as patterns among these projects. But in terms of values driven, what does that mean? I think a lot about motivation for work needs to be tied to the things that we hold close to us, right? It's important to feel your work tied to something bigger, to the values that we hold in general. So what is it that you care about? What is it that your team cares about? Is it pride in work? Are we focused on team success? Is it quality of delivery? Is it high quality buildings that we're building for the next generation, thinking about our kids or our nieces and nephews, right? And excellence. So one way I have heard again and again that motivates people to, you know, commit to doing a little bit more work or harder work to get these buildings built is having a sense that they are building an excellent building. And differentiating that from fancy, right? We're not talking about fancy, but we are talking about a very high quality building that's going to perform. And my colleague Dan Whitmore calls it top shelf, right? We're building top shelf buildings. Acknowledging that it can be hard to motivate people to relearn something, especially when we're working with people who have been in the industry for 30 years, who are familiar with the way things have been, like doing things in the way that they know how to, trust the way that they have been doing things as opposed to trying on something new, which can carry a lot of risk with it. So we're asking a big ask of people to try something new. So again, making that worth it, really explaining the why of Passive House, right? Making sure that people understand why we're asking them to perform differently, to do something maybe that is not very common. And as part of that why, we have to help them understand, you know, to get that buy-in, right? Is it because we want to build durable buildings, healthy air quality? Is it because they're motivated knowing that this building is getting third-party verified, so they're going to get caught? Or maybe, you know, if they're rushing or something like that, that the work is going to get verified. Or perhaps they're getting motivated by fewer callbacks, because if you do something well and you do something right the first time, there's less of a chance of having to come back and fix things. And then the third, besides buy-in and motivation, is commitment, right? See how these are all really similar in values, but they all have a slightly different tint to them. And when we're thinking about commitment, it brings me back to collaboration. So again, delivering this building as a team, no longer just delivering your own scope of work. One interviewee relayed how important it was for him, he was a GC, to loop the subcontractors back in later on when the project reached certification, to let them know, like, hey, your hard work paid off. You know, this was a subcontractor that was not that motivated, was not that bought in, was willing to do the work, but that made all the difference. And when that same subcontractor showed up on the next project, all of a sudden they're Passive House champions, because they saw the results, they saw the benefit of their hard work paying off. So sometimes it can take a little time, right? It may not be that maybe folks are willing, but they don't understand, or they're not agreed to begin with, but later on you may see the results of that attitude change. Folks in this industry have a lot of good ideas. They have a lot of good ideas to bring to the table. And so, you know, one example with trades, they know their trade, they can bring creative ideas back for how to make something more efficient. So a big part of the commitment is making sure that folks feel invited to bring their good ideas to the table, making sure that there is a direct route for people to speak to leadership, you know, whether that is the trade foreman or whether that is all the way up to the architect or the developer, making sure that folks have a voice to bring their good ideas. And again, pride in work, you know, tying the importance of high quality work to our core values, back to, you know, contribution, creativity. People want a sense of purpose with their work, collaboration, and a job well done. So they really found all of these concepts found the true foundation of passive house construction. Okay, so we've talked about values, and now the second big theme that we heard again and again is around planning. And passive house, as we all know, it's not about doing new things, but it's about doing old things with better planning, right? A lot of the techniques are not that new. A lot of the materials, not new. It's actually doing some different details and different planning that will get us there. And so what we heard are a lot of specific lessons about how successful projects get built, how we're contributing to the design process, how we're maintaining effective information flows, and then safeguarding that quality assurance process. And there's a million sections of this planning that we don't have time to cover in a presentation. So again, the report itself has so many more juicy bits than we have time for in this presentation. So communication, that stands out at the top of the list in terms of planning. And one of the biggest pieces are ensuring those excellent communication flows. And what do I mean by direct channels? So often, you know, what we want to avoid is games of telephone. And what we see as being a very successful strategy is making sure that folks have access to talking to the other team members on that building. So for example, FIAS verifier needs to be able to speak directly with the testing and balancing team. Or the GC needs access to the CPHC. It can't be going through the developer. That when we have direct channels of communication, that really can help the information flow. And I guess I just want to also note that I'm using the term verifier very loosely. In the FIAS world, that is a certification requirement that the project has an official certified verifier on it. In the PHI world, the verification role is often played out by a number of different project roles. It can be the architect, it can be the GC, it can be the project certifier. So just of note, I'm just using a shorthand when I say verifier for this presentation. Keeping everyone in CC sounds easy, but you know, when we're using email as opposed to project management software platforms, you know, we've all been victims of these email chains that go on, but it is really important to make sure that the entire project team is aware of changes, right? Or of updates, and that can help head off problems at the pass. As I just mentioned, leveraging construction management software. Most projects these days are getting managed through Buildertrend or Procore or some of these other softwares out there, which is really fantastic because they help reduce the bottlenecks of email, is a big piece that we're seeing. And we could spend a few minutes talking about non-English speakers and making sure that we are communicating clearly to everybody who's working on site. I'm just going to mention a couple ideas and concepts that came up from multiple people. One is around site signage. That's a really easy one. You know, we've all got translation software. It's really easy to do. Making sure that, for example, if we're doing looking at whole building airtightness, airtight signage around site, put it in multiple languages. Another great idea that came up was that one GC said that they only hire trade foremen that speak English to make sure that that person can then translate back to the people with the boots on the ground. So there's a lot of really great ideas out there. I know I'm gonna point out Amy, who's sitting here in the front of the audience, but I know that your course that you do with the Studio for High Performance Design and Construction also focuses on language and making sure that folks on site are able to communicate, right? Seems simple, but it's kind of not the norm, let's say, so far, but we're gonna change that. Okie doke. So we talked about communication. We're gonna talk about kind of 3 stages of planning, right? Design phase, build phase, and then certification phase. So in design review, this came up so many times in these interviews, is that people really wanna see consultants at the table early during design. We wanna see the verifier there. They want the CPHC to be there, that's kind of normal, or the CPHD, but also making sure that the MEP engineer is invited to those early design charrettes. Making sure that we've really got the GC there to do constructability reviews. That everybody was recommending that, you know, the earlier you can bring that team together, the better success you're gonna have, and the more cost effective your project is gonna be. So integrated project delivery has been talked about for many years. It is a lot of the way that projects are being developed right now, but truly for a passive house project, it is consistently critical for these projects for success. One thing that came up a lot is that midpoint air barrier testing. We're going to talk about this in the airtightness section, not required, but super, super common. And making sure that that plan is discussed and developed early during design to make sure that all the decisions that flow from there can get integrated during pre-construction. And then lots of people were recommending, hey, you know, passive house requirements sometimes get buried in the specs. That's not that useful. You know, we wish that our trades read through the specs with as much detail as we want, but that's not always the case. We need to see those passive house details on plans when possible. We need to see those passive house details in contracts. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but of course, when you're delivering a FIAS project, there are co-requisite programs, and those have their own individual checklists and items that need to be incorporated as well. In terms of best practices, a lot of folks in the industry are now doing drawings that are in color, because so many folks on site have a tablet, right? So they can zoom in, they can look in color, and that can be really helpful, especially for example, the air barrier showing up in color. Okay, so, you know, we could spend 40 minutes just talking about pre-construction, but we're going to keep this moving, right? In terms of build planning, kickoff meetings, those are a big deal. Folks are already doing those. That's already the industry norm. And what I'm saying is that a lot of these tips and tricks and insights fit in really well to things that are already happening on site, generally speaking. So look ahead meetings. So, you know, so often on a job site, there'll be the Monday morning look ahead meeting where all the trades come into the job trailer. You talk about everything that's happening on site that week. It's a fantastic time to remind people about the passive house elements that are coming up that need focus. Staff. Okay, this sounds easy. I mean, this sounds like, duh, yeah, we want people to know, but the number of GCs that I spoke with that said that the majority of their trades coming on site didn't know that they were working on a passive house project was astounding to me. So folks, this is just like day in and day out for the trades. And we're lucky here in Massachusetts because we're now building a trade base that is knowledgeable and that is experienced. But more often than not, we're still going to be running into folks that have never heard of passive house, don't know anything about the air barrier, and, you know, frankly, don't care. So whenever we have touch points, whenever we have an opportunity, even just to say two things. Hey, you're working on a passive house. It has an air barrier. You need to be careful with your tools. That there can be enough information for some of the trades that are showing up, but making sure that we've got appropriate training going on. Submittals, everybody's favorite. On a passive house, submittal process can be daunting, right? There can be literally thousands of submittals, and keeping track of those and keeping track of which ones are approved and where to find them and which is the latest iteration that is approved, it can be a nightmare. So again, leveraging the construction management platforms, we have more rules approving them, or at least keep getting their eyes on them in a passive house, right? We've got the CPHC looking at them and for review. We've got the verifier sometimes. So, our approval systems need to be dialed in. So, as that applies to the materials that show up on site, that's also a thing, because we can have the best set of, architectural specs in the world. We can have a whole set of approved submittals, and then we're building, and all of a sudden the site super is like, hang on, like, I don't think this is our, this is not our approved AVB that's already gone on to 11 units here. Let's double check. And so a lot of successful teams now have a very robust system for checking materials in on site to compare them to approved submittals. Okay, so we just talked about the design phase, the build phase, and let's also talk about certification planning, because there is planning that goes into making sure from the get-go that your project is going to pass certification when it comes down to it. Number one, Alexander mentioned this in his introduction, there is incentive money in Massachusetts. There's incentive money for the buildings themselves. There's also incentive money to help with education. So if any of you in the audience or anybody that your colleagues would like to become certified in passive house delivery, as a consultant, as a builder, as a tradesperson, as a verifier, there's money on the table in Massachusetts. You can speak with us about how to access that. And then pre-certification of these buildings. So both PHIAS and PHI offer pre-certification. They call it different things. PHIAS calls it design certification, PHI calls it design assurance. But these are processes where the plans get submitted early to the certification body. The certification organizations are there to help. They want to help. They want to make sure that before you get into build, what you have in your planning stage is going to work. So make sure it's not just your project team that you can lean on, but both, PHI, PHN, PHIAS have all been very, very clear that they want to help projects from the get-go. It's important to know that there are different standards. We've already discussed the fact that there are PHIAS projects happening, there are PHI projects happening, but even within those standards, you may be building a PHI classic one day and a PHI low energy building on another project. Similarly, PHIAS has different standards that kind of roll out with a code cycle. So there's a 2018, there's a 2021, there's a 2024. So it's a really important thing to know, not only for yourselves, but that your whole project team understands that if they're working on two passive house buildings, either consecutively or simultaneously, they may be working in two different versions of the standard. And just to be aware that there are some differences between them. The as-built energy model, right? So both PHIAS and PHI, generally speaking, are going to have an energy model. It's generally the rule of thumb, unless in some cases, if you're working on a single family, it's not. But generally, there's an energy model. Who here has ever delivered a project with 0 changes? Right? It doesn't exist. So every single project is going to have changes in material, changes in plan, whatever it is. And those changes need to continue to be updated in the energy model to make sure that that building continues to meet certification requirements. There's a lot of documentation. That's all I'm gonna say about that, having processes for tracking that. And then the other thing that we heard a lot from people is that it's so important to have buffers in that energy model. So working with your CPHC, with your CPHD, to make sure that there's a little bit of wiggle room and understanding how much wiggle room you have. So that may be being conservative in your airtightness and then trying to beat that in delivery. Or it may be putting in some more conservative numbers in your equipment, your HVAC equipment, for example, so that if you need to run your ventilation system at a slightly higher energy, that it's not going to blow your model, right? So there was a lot of talk about making sure you had buffers. Value engineering. So again, it comes back to the why, right? So a lot of developers in Massachusetts are on board. They absolutely want to do this. Now that we're moving past kind of this early adopter stage into the mainstream, we are, Alexander are already getting questions from developers. I know that many of you in the audience are also in your practices getting questions from developers, which is the right pathway for me. If you're not in the specialized zone, like which way do I go? Developers who are like, what's this passive house thing? Is it just something that I stick on at the end? And so helping to bring this whole group of folks up to speed with why some of the elements that are built into these plans are there and that they can't be value engineered out. Some of these are non-negotiables, right? Like we were just talking about buffers, contingency budgeting is also important. Is there some budget room? Is there some room for the GC to call up the verifier? Or are they going to get charged every single time they do that? Can we build in some contingency to give room for project teams helping others on the team, right? What about ductwork? Is there maybe a budget in there for belt and suspenders approach? Can you do pressurized air sealing, like through AeroSeal, right? Is that already a contingency item that's built in? It doesn't have to be in the budget necessarily, but is there money there? So when push comes to shove and you're not quite hitting your ventilation numbers, can you get there? And then mock-ups always want to be next, right? In some cases, they're required by code, but in other cases, they can just be value engineered out. And what I heard from everybody just about across the board is the value of mock-ups. Everybody was like, they pay for themselves. Don't get rid of them. And while we can't promise that they pay for themselves, at the same time, it's a fantastic opportunity to work through issues before you install 100 windows. Make sure you're really dialed in on your window install. And then hand-holding budgets. The fact of the matter is that the industry is still coming up to speed. And while we were in this steep learning curve phase, there needs to be a little bit of room for further education, for consulting, for being able to pick up the phone and call your verifier with more questions. Maybe instead of 1 or 2 midpoint air barrier tests, your project ends up requiring 3 or 4, as that learning curve is real. So making sure that there's some room in the budget somewhere to allow for those that are more educated to be able to disseminate that information within the team. And schedule. So, as a project manager all these years, it's always budget and schedule. Like those are the 2 things because they're very interrelated, right? And as we're talking about passive house as it relates to the schedule, we need to make sure that all of those passive house milestones are there, plain and simple. Maybe they're, I was going to say black and white, but maybe they're actually in color in your schedule. We've heard that that's a good practice. Making sure that the blower door tests are there, inspections are there, making sure that those milestones are built in, and not only that they're built in, but they're part of the critical path that you don't cover. How many folks have been on a job site, you get your insulation inspection and your drywall crew has already unloaded, they're ready to go. They've basically, got their tool in their hand, they're ready to start going. And in this case, you probably want to buffer a little bit of time in the schedule and make sure that if you're finding air leaks, get them fixed before you cover, right? It's so much less expensive to fix things when they're exposed than later on in finishes. It's one of the things we heard time and again, is it will absolutely blow your budget to go chasing around air leaks late in the project. And then, I thought this was a fantastic idea. Some people require that they have key trades there during midpoint testing, during blower door testing, during inspections. It's a cool educational opportunity for the trades to see. And sometimes if you're using smoke guns, other things like that, you can literally see air leaking, right? And it's just it's a cool way to make sure that you're closing the loop on that education. The reason we're asking you to do this is for airtightness. Now you get to see airtightness in action. And then some folks are also asking, jurisdictional inspectors to be on site at that same time too. Okay, how are we doing on time? I'm gonna wrap these sections up pretty quickly. So airtightness, we all know that passive house requires a higher level of airtightness that's tied to more than just energy efficiency, right? It's also tied to high quality buildings in many ways. So I keep underlining this, it keeps showing up, having people understand the why. Having a comprehensive designs, again, that sounds like, oh, it's just kind of a basic bullet point, but no, it's so critical. This is where trades are able to actually perform when they have a comprehensive set of plans. Even when they're not experienced in passive house, they can deliver a good set of plans. Sequencing needs to really be discussed during pre-con. There's going to be some different sequencing that happens on these projects, such as if you're building, say, a multifamily project that has a commercial space on the first floor for airtightness. For midpoint testing, you may need to have your commercial storefront glass installed halfway through construction, when in a typical job, you might install that later on. So thinking through sequencing, clearly assigning responsibilities, so that avoids finger pointing, making sure who is responsible for the air barrier, delineating that in your contracts as well. Site signage, we've talked about that somewhat. And then the air boss, this idea of having a passive house specialist, oftentimes that is ending up being like a site super. It does not have to be a site super, but having one person on the team, or sometimes it's a small group, who really are responsible for those passive house details and mainly responsible for the QA/QC of those details. As we've discussed, midpoint testing not required, but pretty much everybody's doing this because you want to know that you're going to pass well before you get to the end of a project, right? So functional air testing, as opposed to focusing on the numbers, doing smoke test, having your IR camera, seeing where those air leaks are. We want to get this into the schedule as we've discussed, and making sure that our procurement lines up, especially on a big project that can be complex. You can be at very different stages of construction on a big project. So having a testing plan that's going to work for the style of your building is important. And of course, protect that from VE we discussed. So the passive house boundary, if you were here for our June event, you can also look it up on our website. We had a whole presentation about the passive house boundary. There's some sections that may be excluded from the passive house boundary. Those could look like podium, parts of podium construction, or communal laundry rooms, egress stairways, trash chutes, things like that. We need to carefully consider those and look at the sequencing of those. One thing I heard a lot of times GC is complaining about is that in order to detail a trash chute, it's literally too small to get inside of. You can't air seal it from the inside. And so making sure that plans reflect constructability once again. Windows and doors are important. Of all elements of, the enclosure, windows and doors do carry a lot of weight. We need to make sure that we can get the types of data that shows up that need to be input into the energy model from our manufacturers. That's not always a given in North America. So we need to vet those manufacturers first. Hinged windows, sliding windows leak. Of the few projects that have not been able to meet certification, generally it's due to sliding windows. So we need to use hinged windows of one variety or another, specifically for airtightness. Installation and training, again, going back to those mock-ups, making sure that we're training those teams who are going to be putting it in. Ventilation. Ventilation is tripping up a lot of teams right now. I'm hearing that a lot across the industry. I know that there are a lot of opinions in the industry right now about ventilation and best strategies. We are not here to tell you what is the best strategy. Every strategy can work. And mostly what we're seeing is with a focus on aligning your team early on that practice, that has been really great. Acknowledging that every approach has trade-offs, and an emphasis that, kind of like I mentioned earlier, making sure our equipment has some wiggle room in the energy model. We're not just inputting the manufacturer provided data in there, making sure that we've got some room in case our ventilation system is not, delivered exactly as designed. We can do some tweaking, which may increase our energy load, but there's room for it in the energy model. And making equipment and filters accessible. Seems simple, but it's not always in the design. Ductwork, it's a big deal. We need to have really high quality ductwork. We need to be running clash detection to ensure that we've got long straight runs. We need to actually put the passive house metrics into our subcontracts. A lot of times our HVAC teams or our testing and balancing, our tab teams are not even aware of the passive house metrics. They need to be in black and white in front of our folks so that they can deliver. There's a lot of QC that needs to be done, both visually, testing. I know that oftentimes ductwork is not tested until later on during commissioning. And sometimes you can do a Hail Mary, like you can do some aerosolized, pressure, like with AeroSeal, but a lot of times if you can get that testing done early, it's gonna really help out making sure that you can get those delivery flows. And so we've talked about the design of it, we've talked about the install of it, now we're talking about the commissioning, right? So communication between those tab teams and your verifier, between those tab teams and your GC directly. Often the tab team may be hired by the HVAC subcontractor, and it can be a little hard to just have direct communication with those folks. Let's open that up. We need to make sure that our testing and balancing agents, they're very good at what they're good at. And a lot of times they haven't worked on passive house projects. They haven't worked to the low flow environment that is being required on these projects. So they may not be aware of the standard or the differences here. Again, let's put this information in the contracts. Let's be specific about the testing methodologies and making sure that the verifier is there on site the first day that your tab team shows up. And this is not quite commissioning, this is sort of after building turnover, but we also need to put a good, robust plan in place to make sure that those building operators know how to change a filter, know that there's condensate lines, know, so one of the interviews was like, if my heating goes down in my building, I'm gonna hear about it right away. If my air conditioning is not working, 100% I'm gonna know about it. If the ventilation system is off or it's clogged, I might not know about it for 2 months. Nobody might figure it out. So we need to make sure that we have really good, robust systems in place to be checking on this equipment and making sure it's operational. Damper design. So again, whole team alignment, making sure that we understand how we're going to be delivering this air in the places where we need it. Let's make those dampers accessible. There's troubleshooting. There may be equipment malfunction. We need to make sure that we can get back there and get to them. They can't be buried. And clear guidance on testing protocols. I know that SWA and many others in the industries have been working a lot on showing that there are different methodologies that work differently. So let's make sure that we're clear on that. And then a lot of our interviewees shared information about role specific. And I asked everyone who needed Pass training the most. And literally everybody I interviewed like pointed in a different direction, right? So clearly the industry is coming up together in this. But just to point out, the two biggest areas, one, people were pointing at design, and of that design training, making sure that these buildings are optimized, that we have constructability reviews, that our control layers, like our airtightness layer, is very clear, and being aware of low load mechanicals. And you don't have to be fluent in energy modeling, but having experience in energy modeling helps a lot on the design side. On the build side, trades need very basic information at the very least. They need to know that they're working on a passive house. They need to know that there's an air barrier. They need to be empowered to speak up when they see something wrong, because we have hundreds of eyes on site and all of those are potential areas for QA/QC, right? GCs need better training to be able to spot the problem and visual inspections as they're walking the site. And of course, GCs end up doing a lot of education. That's not necessarily the role that they signed up for, but guess what? They end up teaching a lot when they're on site. And so all of that has culminated in an education strategy for us that we're going to be, I'm sure, at various points talking to you all more about. But I'd like to just go over a couple of very brief things before we open things up to questions here. Community events, Passive House Massachusetts, as you know, we host these monthly meetings. We also have a symposium coming up, details to follow, December 9th. So mark your calendars for that. Thank you for coming. Please spread the word. We love having you here. We're revamping some 100 and 200 level courses. What you need to know is that you can get these for free. Call us. We will come and deliver trainings to your company or perhaps to a small cohort of folks and deliver catered content to the different role that you play in construction. We're going to be developing various training elements connecting to all these different things that are coming up here on the slide. But then also we want to underline that we want your feedback. Your good ideas are what has informed our curriculum development thus far. And if you have ideas for improvement, if you have ideas that are critical, we want to hear them. Basically, you know, our broad community is what helps shape this work. And we're very interested in improving. So key takeaways: true teamwork, optimization during design can save a lot of money and headache, right? Planning your work and working your plan takes a lot of planning. Making sure we're aware of the red flags. If we make mistakes, we want to be making new mistakes. We don't want to make the same mistakes again, right? There's other people who have made very costly mistakes. Let's learn from them and make new mistakes. And don't move until you have the green light, right? And here's the thing, everybody becomes a teacher. Once you've had some experience, all of a sudden people start coming to you. So be prepared, right? Be prepared to start giving information, sharing your information. We've got the report up on our website. It's available for download. If you'd like to open this up now, that's great. Otherwise, we're going to be sharing this, you know, via social media. We'll, I'm sure, have it in our newsletters, other ways of announcing it. And we will see you at the Passive House Massachusetts Symposium for more and bigger and better learning, a full day of excellent curated content, December 9th. So I hope you have your calendars marked for that. And perhaps I'll leave it here. As we wrap up, we're going to take questions.
We have to ask you Beth, big round of applause. Mic here for questions. Hi,
it on?
Ray, we can alternate any questions in person and in the room. Would someone here like to start us off?
Beth, that was great. I loved every detail in it. And knowing how much time you've spent on this topic, in this industry, even before doing these 40 interviews. I'm curious if there was anything that was new and surprising.
There was
You-
tons. It's in the report.
Pick one, the one where you were like, oh.
I think one of the best ones is that we have an opportunity to touch every single person that comes on site via the safety meeting. So generally speaking, on a commercial or on a multifamily site, everybody has to check into the job trailer and get a sticker for their hard hat saying that they've been through the logistics and the safety training. That's a perfect time to let people know that they're working on a passive house. And one of the education initiatives is going to be developing some very short curriculum that'll be in multiple languages for trades to be able to show up. But like, yeah, duh, that's a fantastic idea, not my idea.
No one online yet, so the room doesn't have a chance.
And you can also share your fabulous ideas that didn't make it into the interview process. And I know
if
you all
read
have.
the report and you're like, this is missing something, or this is wrong, you should tell us, and we'll change it. It's on the website. We haven't graven it in stone yet,
Yeah.
so tell us if we got it wrong.
Any of your own key takeaways from here tonight?
Okay, I'm gonna ask another one.
Well, that's behind you, Mitchell.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted. Hi, I'm Mitch. Were they all based off of new construction or retro?
Yes, I didn't clarify that, and I wish I had, now that you say that. This was mainly, the people I interviewed were all working on multiple projects, so most people were working on new construction. Most people were focused on multifamily construction. But there were some people represented that also worked on single family and a range of, retrofits.
Here's an interviewee themselves.
Thanks, that was awesome, loved it, but we're missing costing for all of this, and just today we were speaking with some folks that are trying to get the specialized opting code adopted for their municipality that's in the stretch code. And, the argument is always, it's too expensive, especially for single family homes. We just got some information back just today on the project that we finished in Mansfield, where it was a $7.18 increase beyond the 2021 IUCC to go to FIAS. So that's like super valuable information that we hope to bundle up and share, but you could also start sharing some cost per square foot or percent increase. And it's tricky because the projects that are being certified right now probably were being constructed during COVID.
Yep.
Our supply chains are just a mess.
We do have some lag there, but we do have good data based on the pilot that was conducted with the initial, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Kelly, just outing her as from working from Mass CEC, with the Mass CEC pilot program of 2 to 3% for multifamily in Massachusetts. And so that's a good place to start. We know that that's not the whole story, as you mentioned.
We would also be glad to share that information you compile, and we agree with you that we need more cost information, which is why the symposium that Beth mentioned is in fact, the theme of the symposium is raising standards, lowering costs as a cost focus. We're also going to be co-sponsoring an event at Greentown Labs with SWA and Beacon Climate Initiative, different than Beacon Communities. Beacon Climate Initiative, that's also gonna be called Pay It Forward. We're gonna be releasing this on our email this week. It's also gonna be addressing cost issues. And this report, you can see in the URL, is called Cost Efficient Passive House Delivery. There is a running theme throughout the report, linking the different methods and techniques to their impact on cost. So it's something we're aware of, and it's something we want to communicate more on and program more on. And we'd love to share that information you've gotten and share all the other information that we're collecting.
Thank you, super important.
And I would just add, if we're doing cost analysis, figuring out what pockets within that are drivers of the highest premiums too. If it is a matter of workforce development or skills gapping, dispelling some of that apprehension or mythology is a good thing.
Right.
Yeah, and we do a bunch of myth busting on this as well. If people contact us for their needs or adopting a specialized code, we perform analysis. This is also something you can send people to us for if you're looking for other resources. We're happy to help support communities. One of the educational things there was public outreach. And so we do a lot of talking to communities, showing them that the specialized code is not actually reduced housing production in any noticeable way in the aggregate. So
Mhm.
that's also an important part of what we do and something we're happy to help you guys do, if you're involved in doing that.
Yeah, and not to be reductionist, but I do love this quote, optimization and then not making mistakes. Where you have to go back and fix some two best ways to save money on these things, right?
Let's check this.
And check see if anybody on it.
Okay. All right, Luke McNeely. I love the points regarding planning for things like getting passive house inspections and tests into the project schedule early in design, and also putting the trades in the AHJs in some of those tests. I imagine it may be a challenge to engage all those folks while also getting testing done. That's fair, and we are looking forward to working with Luke McNeely and his colleagues to make sure it does happen. And so Hale Jabari says, thank you so much.
Great.
Does that mean they're gonna incentivize the trades training?
We're actively seeking some support for the trades training, and we hope to be able to announce positive things on that. But we are gonna be piloting trades training soon, and we're gonna look into that.
Right. And as we're developing the, 100 and 200 level content, especially the 200 level content, we recognize that we can deliver a 2-hour 101 that can be pretty generic, but to actually meet for information to be relevant to your role, it quickly starts to branch off. So as we develop the 200 level trainings, we'll be looking to really cater those to different roles, architectures, right? Verifiers, trades, HVAC. Laura.
So perfect segue into my question. I just got this today in my office because people, CQC specifically, are looking for CEUs, and I know things like this give you a credit, right?
Mhm.
Symposium will give you a boatload of credits, I think
Mhm.
6 or so.
Mhm.
Are the 200 series going to be?
Yes. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Finish my question.
And I just wanna add on that 100, 200 level, if there's any of you sitting here thinking, I know all this stuff. They're like, you know all this already, this is fine. That's good, that's great, right? We want more people to know all this stuff. But these are all things that explicitly people told us they either didn't know, or they didn't used to know, or lots of people on their projects didn't know and should have known.
Mhm.
So if you're thinking like, oh no, I got this information, not everybody does. And we wanna make sure every organization has a strategy to get that information in the hands of people who need it. Anybody else have one last question? I can check the chat.
Getting your cardio in. Yeah.
Alright, here we go, one more.
Yeah, because I guess. With the focus, I see a lot of work on occupied retrofits and existing building stuff going on.
Yeah.
Wonder if you had any thoughts on kind of how education needs to be tailored to that specifically, because it's kind of a special beast.
We're gonna be seeing a lot more retrofits happening, especially with Berto and Bardo here in Massachusetts. And a lot of these principles apply certainly to retrofits, and there's gonna be a wealth of information that's coming from the retrofit community as well. So I think I would say stay tuned for that, and agreed, there's a lot that's gonna be learned, especially about cost-effective renovations. Yeah. Can we do one more? Or are we?
Well, just a quick
Yeah.
comment, just. When it comes to that, the retrofitting and multifamily and office to res, we're getting a lot of conversations and inquiries regarding that. You've got a use change trigger, you've got the fact that it's multifamily, usually large scale, so that's. Again, something that will likely be pushing more and more over the next, say, 18 to 24 months, but.
Yeah.
we'll see.
And I was gonna say, we're committed to making sure that we're providing education to everybody building passive house projects, whether it's existing or in retrofit or new construction, single family or multifamily. And in working with our partners, people like the Studio for High Performance Design and Construction, reaching just high performance construction generally in the state. So, we wanna reach everyone who's trying to do high performance construction. And to that point, again, if you read the report, you look in here, and not just if there's something wrong, but you think, you know what, there's other things that aren't being covered, other things I wish there was more research and knowledge about. This is not the last report we intend to write.
And that's not the last interview that I intend to conduct
No,
either.
no, we wanna talk to
right?
more
Yeah.
people, we wanna
Yeah.
get more insights.
So I
and
haven't talked to you yet, get my card and let's talk.
Yeah, Beth it's great to talk to, she's a great interviewer, I've watched the video, it's just a great job, she's fun to talk to. If you want either to talk with us, or you think this is a topic I'd really like them to cover more, either in our programming or in our research, or in our teaching, whatever it is, just be in touch. Contact us, Beth at PHMass.org, Alexander at PHMass.org, we check our emails constantly, too much probably. We wanna hear from you, all of this only going to work, all of our strategies, all the points, only are going to work, we're not building any buildings. We're not retrofitting any of them ourselves,
Except my own house.
except your own house, yeah, I changed the light fixture of my house. None of this works without your participation, and that's why we're so excited to have you guys here and to continue collaborating,
Thank you.
thank you so much.